He was a man of immense wealth, a billionaire who had everything the world could offer: mansions, luxury cars, private jets, and a life many people could only dream of. Yet, despite all of his success and power, he carried a secret worry. He feared that those around him, even the people who claimed to love him, might not see him for who he truly was. The fear of being taken advantage of had grown over the years, and it touched him more when he thought about love. He wanted to propose to his fiancée, a woman who seemed perfect in every way. She was elegant, charming, and spoke with a grace that turned heads. He had met her at a social event months ago, and their relationship had blossomed quickly. On the surface, everything seemed ideal, but he was haunted by doubt. Could she be with him for love, or was it his wealth she sought? Late one evening, as he sat in his private study, he made a decision. He would conduct a test, one that could reveal the truth about her heart. He would pretend to have a disability, something serious enough to require daily care and attention. He would watch how she responded, how much effort she would put into helping him, whether her concern was genuine or shallow. It was a risky plan, but he convinced himself it was necessary. Trust was not something he could give blindly, and he needed proof before taking the next step in their relationship. To carry out his plan, he would need help. Someone reliable. Someone who could support him in his daily life without judgment. That person was his maid, a woman who had worked in his household for several years. She was not only skilled and efficient, but also carried a warmth and kindness that went unnoticed by most. She came from humble beginnings, and her life had been shaped by hard work and perseverance. Despite her modest background, she had an eye for detail, a sense of empathy, and a natural ability to care for others without expecting anything in return. He knew she would be the perfect observer, the quiet witness to his fiancée, his true character. The next morning, he began his transformation. He feigned difficulty walking, leaning on a cane as he moved from room to room. The maid, who had grown used to his independence, noticed the change immediately. She looked at him with concern, but did not ask questions that might embarrass him. She simply offered her help with a gentle nod, ready to support him however he needed. Her quiet attentiveness reminded him why he had trusted her for so long. Her presence was steady, reliable, and unobtrusive, a sharp contrast to the world of superficial charm he usually navigated. When his fiancée arrived later that day, he noticed the slight lift in her eyebrows as she saw him with the cane. Her smile was polite, tinged with curiosity, as she approached him. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft, though he could detect a subtle strain beneath it. He allowed her to help him sit, and he observed her reactions carefully. Every gesture, every word, every moment of hesitation was being catalogued in his mind. At first, she seemed caring, offering to adjust his chair and asking if he needed assistance with anything. But as the conversation continued, he noticed the small signs that suggested discomfort. She flinched when he mentioned needing help with simple tasks. She suggested hiring extra help, even though he knew she could manage herself. She smiled, but the warmth felt calculated, as if she were weighing the inconvenience against the benefits of staying by his side. He felt a pang of disappointment, but also a strange curiosity. How far would she go? Would she show true concern, or would her patience run out when faced with real effort? Meanwhile, the maid moved quietly around the room, fetching water, adjusting cushions, and offering support with a gentle hand. She did not comment on the situation or draw attention to herself. Her actions were simple but meaningful. She made him realize that there was a kind of goodness in the world that required no pretense, no performance. It was genuine, heartfelt, and quiet, often unnoticed by those seeking glory or recognition. Her presence became a calming force in the midst of his complicated scheme. Days passed. The billionaire continued his act. He observed the fiancée closely, noting her reactions to the challenges he pretended to face. She grew impatient with the extra effort required, occasionally sighing when asked to assist him. Her questions about his well-being often sounded rehearsed, polite but lacking warmth. Each interaction added a layer of clarity to his doubts. He realized that her love, if it existed, was fragile and conditional. It depended more on convenience than care. The maid, on the other hand, began to occupy more of his thoughts than he expected. Her small acts of kindness, the way she anticipated his needs, and her quiet patience were touching him deeply. It was not just about the help she provided. It was the way she offered it, without expectation, without a hint of calculation or selfish motive. She had a natural ability to make him feel cared for, not because of his wealth or power, but because she truly noticed him as a person. He found himself watching her more closely, noticing the way her eyes reflected empathy, the subtle smile she gave when something went smoothly, and the care with which she performed her tasks. He started to see the stark contrast between the fiancée and the maid. One was outwardly polished and charming, yet her concern felt surface level. The other was modest, almost invisible in her quiet diligence, yet her heart shone through in every small gesture. The billionaire began to wonder if his search for love had been misguided. Had he been looking for it in the wrong places? Had he overlooked the very person who showed him what real care and devotion looked like? One evening, after a particularly tiring day of pretending to struggle, he found himself resting in his study. The fiancée had left earlier, citing other engagements, and the house was quiet. The maid approached with a tray of tea and some light snacks. She offered them, with a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting concern and attentiveness. He accepted them, feeling a sense of warmth that had nothing to do with his wealth or status. She did not speak of the test, the fiancé, or his doubts. She simply cared. And in that simple, human moment, he felt a stir of something unexpected: admiration, gratitude, and perhaps the beginnings of a deeper emotion. He realized that this experiment, meant to reveal his fiancée's character, had done more than that. It had shown him something he had almost forgotten: the value of genuine human kindness, the beauty of selfless care, and the quiet strength of someone who gives love without expecting anything in return. He understood that the true test of character was not in grand gestures or polished appearances, but in the small, unnoticed actions that reflected a person's heart. From that moment on, he watched the dynamics of his household with new eyes. He observed the fiancée's impatience and discomfort with more clarity, seeing the cracks in her facade. He also watched the maid with growing respect and appreciation, recognizing the subtle ways she touched his life without ever drawing attention to herself. The contrast was clear, and the lessons were undeniable. The billionaire knew that the journey ahead would challenge his assumptions about love and trust, and he felt a mix of anticipation and humility. He had started this test to judge someone else, but in the process, he had begun to learn more about himself, his values, and the kind of love he truly desired. That night, as he lay in his lavish bedroom, the cane by his side and the quiet of the mansion surrounding him, he thought about the path he had chosen. He realized that wealth could buy comfort and status, but it could not purchase sincerity or devotion. Those were treasures far more valuable, and they were found in the small acts of kindness that the maid had shown. The billionaire understood that his heart was beginning to shift, that the test he had planned might lead to an outcome he had never expected. And in that quiet reflection, he felt a mixture of hope and nervousness, eager to see how the coming days would unfold, knowing that his life and his understanding of love was on the brink of change. The days following the billionaire's decision to pretend he had a disability were filled with careful observation and quiet reflection. His fiancée continued to visit as if nothing had changed, smiling politely and asking questions that sounded caring on the surface. Yet he noticed subtle hints in her tone and expressions. There were sighs when asked to help him with simple tasks, a slight impatience in her movements, and a careful measurement of her words, as if she were constantly evaluating the effort required. He realized that the charm he had once admired in her now seemed fragile, maintained only as long as it was convenient. He observed her trying to balance her interest in him with her own comfort. When she offered to adjust his chair or hand him objects, it was never without a glance at the clock or a soft complaint about the inconvenience. She spoke gently, but her warmth felt limited, like a candle burning briefly before fading. The billionaire's heart sank slightly as he noticed these inconsistencies. But he kept the test going, reminding himself that the truth was more important than the pain of disappointment. The maid, in contrast, moved about the house with quiet efficiency and an ease that came from familiarity. She anticipated his needs before he even spoke them aloud. When he struggled to reach something on a high shelf, she stepped forward without a word, handing it to him with a calm, gentle smile. When he spilled a drink, she appeared instantly with a cloth and a reassuring glance. There were no sighs, no questions. No hesitation, only a willingness to help and a sense of genuine concern that made the billionaire pause and think. How could someone care so much without expecting anything in return? As the week went on, the billionaire found himself noticing small details about the maid that he had never paid attention to before. The way she spoke softly to him when he appeared frustrated. The care she took in preparing his meals, remembering his preferences. The subtle kindness in her eyes, a light that had nothing to do with wealth or obligation. He began to wonder if he had underestimated her all along. If the genuine human warmth she carried had been invisible to him because he had been too focused on appearances. Meanwhile, his fiancée began to show cracks in her carefully maintained persona. On several occasions, she expressed mild irritation at his reliance on others, hinting that he should manage on his own more often. She complimented his wealth, but seemed to find his needs burdensome. The billionaire watched these moments closely, noting the way her eyes shifted. Her hands fidgeted, and the brief, almost imperceptible sighs that punctuated her words. It became clear to him that her affection was conditional, dependent on convenience rather than true empathy. There was a day when he asked for help with something as simple as walking from one room to another. His fiancée followed reluctantly, offering minimal support and expressing her impatience, subtly but unmistakably. The billionaire felt a sharp pang of disappointment, realizing that the person he had hoped to love him unconditionally might not be capable of it. At the same time, the maid moved closer, steadying him with a gentle hand, her eyes filled with quiet reassurance. The contrast between their reactions was undeniable, and he began to question everything he thought he knew about trust and care. He noticed. 2. The moments when the maid interacted with him without any expectation. She never spoke of the test, never asked why he had changed, never demanded attention or recognition. Her presence was steady, comforting, and unassuming. She moved around the house as if it were her own, tending to small details, correcting minor inconveniences, and always thinking of his well-being. He felt a warmth in his chest that was unfamiliar, a recognition of something deeply human and sincere that he had almost forgotten in his pursuit of wealth and status. One afternoon, while he rested in his study, the fiancée leaned forward with a polite expression. "You must be careful," she said softly. "This could be dangerous for you if you push yourself too hard." But her words lacked conviction, her concern measured and restrained. He noticed how her gaze flicked away, almost as if she were counting the minutes until she could leave. The billionaire felt a growing sense of unease and disappointment, realizing that the love he had imagined might have been an illusion. The maid, however, entered quietly, placing a cup of tea on the table, her eyes meeting his with genuine care. "Here, this will help you feel better," she said simply, her voice warm. It was a small act, but it struck him profoundly. In the following days, the billionaire found himself observing his fiancée with increasing scrutiny. Her visits became shorter, her interest in his well-being less sincere. When he asked for help, she responded with reluctance, her gestures mechanical and polite, but devoid of warmth. He realized that she had been testing him in her own way, evaluating how much effort she would need to invest and whether it was worth it. The clarity was painful but necessary. He had conducted this test to uncover her true intentions, and now he saw them for what they were, shallow and self-serving at the same time. The maid's presence became a source of comfort he had not anticipated. Her simple acts of kindness, a towel placed on a chair, gentle adjustment of his cushion, a soft word of encouragement, began to fill spaces in his life he had never realized were empty. He caught himself watching her as she moved about the house, admiring the quiet dedication and genuine care she brought to every task. He began to understand that her actions were not motivated by money, obligation, or fear, but by a natural empathy that came from the heart. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, the billionaire found himself seated in the living room, the weight of the test pressing on him. The fiancée had left earlier, complaining of a busy schedule, leaving him in the quiet of the mansion. The maid approached with a small tray, carrying a light meal and a cup of tea. She placed it gently in front of him, smiling without a word. Her presence was calm and reassuring, a silent acknowledgement of his struggles. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, and something more, a realization that he had been searching for love in the wrong places. As he sipped his tea, he thought about the contrast between the fiancée and the maid. One offered polite concern, filtered through the lens of convenience and expectation. The other offered genuine care, untainted by pretense or self-interest. The billionaire recognized that the heart of a person could not be measured by words alone, nor by appearances. It was revealed in actions, in the quiet moments when someone chose to help without being asked, to comfort without seeking praise. The maid embodied this truth, and he felt an awakening within himself, a growing understanding of what real love and devotion could be. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. The fiancée's visits became more superficial, her expressions of concern increasingly tinged with impatience. The billionaire watched her closely, noting each small sign of discomfort and disinterest. It was clear that her love, if it could be called that, was fragile and conditional. Meanwhile, the maid's consistent care and kindness deepened his reflection. He began to see her not just as an employee, but as someone with a heart capable of genuine empathy and understanding. Her actions spoke louder than words, revealing a depth of character he had rarely encountered. The billionaire started to anticipate her small gestures, appreciating the quiet way she improved his life without fanfare. She adjusted his chair when he wasn't looking, prepared meals with his preferences in mind, and offered a comforting word when he seemed weary. Each act, no matter how small, left a mark on him. He realized that her goodness was not performative but inherent, a reflection of who she was rather than what she hoped to gain. In observing her, he began to question the very nature of his previous relationships, wondering how many had been drawn to him for the wrong reasons. One morning, he found himself reflecting on the purpose of his test. What had begun as an experiment to uncover his fiancée's intentions had evolved into a deeper lesson about human connection. The maid had become more than a helper. She had become a mirror, reflecting the qualities he had long admired but rarely found in others. Her selfless care, her quiet strength, and her unassuming presence had opened his eyes to the true meaning of love and trust. He understood that wealth could buy many things, but it could not purchase sincerity, empathy, or genuine affection. By the end of the second week, the billionaire felt a shift within himself. The fiancée's superficial concern had become increasingly evident. While the maid's quiet devotion had grown impossible to ignore, he began to see the world differently, recognizing the value of authenticity over appearance, of heart over status. The test he had planned to measure someone else's character had unexpectedly become a journey of self-discovery, revealing not only the truths about those around him, but also the values he held most dear as he prepared for the day. Leaning on his cane and moving with the careful precision of his act, he felt a mixture of anticipation and reflection. The fiancée would arrive soon, and he would observe her again, noting every reaction, every expression, every word. But more than that, he would continue to watch the maid, learning from her example and appreciating the quiet goodness that filled his home. In the contrast between them, he found clarity, and in that clarity, the first seeds of a new understanding of love began to take root. By the third week of his experiment, the billionaire had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the household. Each day he carefully played the part of someone struggling, relying on the support of those around him. The fiancée's visits had become predictable. Her concern seemed less genuine, more like a polite performance designed to maintain appearances. When asked to assist him, she complied, but with subtle signs of reluctance and eye roll when she thought no one was looking. A sigh of frustration, a glance at the clock as if measuring how much longer she needed to stay. The billionaire watched carefully, every gesture, every nuance, knowing that these moments were the proof he had been seeking. But it was the maid who continued to draw his attention. She moved through the house with grace and quiet purpose, helping without being asked, noticing details that even he had forgotten existed. She adjusted his cushions, prepared meals just the way he liked them, and often reminded him to rest or take care of himself. all in a tone that was gentle, caring, and never condescending. Her presence was like a steady light, warming the edges of his heart in ways that wealth and luxury never had. He began to realize that her kindness was not limited to actions. It extended to a genuine understanding of his feelings and needs. She treated him as a person, not as a project or a source of income. One afternoon, a more significant challenge presented itself. The billionaire decided to stage a situation where he appeared to be in genuine discomfort. To see how both the fiancée and the maid would respond, he moved more slowly, leaning heavily on his cane, pretending to stumble slightly. The fiancée, upon witnessing this, hurried to him, her voice tight with what seemed to be concern. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, though her body language betrayed impatience. She glanced around as if she expected someone else to step in, as though she wanted to help, but was hesitant to inconvenience herself too much. Her attention seemed fragmented, her gestures measured and controlled. The maid, however, reacted immediately. She moved closer, steadying him with firm yet gentle hands, her eyes meeting his with warmth and calm reassurance. She knelt beside him, adjusting his posture and ensuring that he was comfortable. "Take your time, don't rush," she said softly. There was no hesitation, no complaint, only an instinctive care that came naturally. In that moment, the billionaire felt a surge of emotion he had not anticipated. He had expected to be disappointed by his fiancée, but the depth of the maid's selflessness had begun to pierce through his carefully guarded heart. The fiancée, sensing the intimacy of the moment, stepped back slightly, her smile polite but strained. She offered a few more words of concern but lacked the genuine warmth that radiated from the maid's simple, reassuring presence. The contrast was undeniable, and the billionaire felt a mixture of sadness and revelation. He realized that the person he had been preparing to spend his life with might not be capable of the true empathy and devotion he sought. Meanwhile, the maid had shown without question that she could care deeply and consistently, without needing to be asked, rewarded, or recognized. Over the next few days, the billionaire continued to observe. He asked small favors, staged minor struggles, and watched carefully. The fiancée's patience grew thinner with each task. She would help, but her assistance was often accompanied by subtle signs of frustration or withdrawal. She seemed to weigh each act of care against the inconvenience it caused her, as though every gesture was a negotiation rather than a genuine expression of concern. Her love, he realized, was conditional and fragile. It was dependent on comfort, ease, and convenience. Rather than a heartfelt commitment to support and nurture him through difficulties, in contrast, the maid's actions were consistent and unwavering. She responded instantly, without hesitation, and with a calm, steady demeanor that spoke of genuine care. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them, noticed changes in his mood, and adjusted her approach to provide comfort. She spoke softly, not to draw attention to herself, but to soothe and support him. The billionaire began to notice small moments of humanity that he had never paid attention to before. How she touched his hand gently when he seemed fatigued, how she smiled reassuringly after a difficult task, and how she seemed to genuinely enjoy helping without seeking praise or recognition. There was a defining moment one evening. The billionaire had arranged for a more serious simulation of his disability, pretending that he could not stand without assistance. He called for help, knowing both the fiancée and the maid would respond. The fiancée arrived first, her expression showing both concern and subtle exasperation. She helped him up, but her movements were measured, her attention divided. She made sure he was safe, but her eyes darted to the clock, and she seemed eager for the task to be over. Her words of care felt rehearsed, polite, and careful, but they lacked the warmth that would make him feel truly supported. The maid arrived shortly after, noticing the situation instantly. She stepped in with a natural ease, adjusting him gently, ensuring his balance, and providing comfort with every movement. Her hands were steady, her eyes attentive, her voice soothing. "It's okay. Take your time. We will manage together," she said softly. The billionaire felt his chest tighten with emotion. He had not expected to be moved so deeply, but the sincerity in her actions and words left him profoundly touched. he realized that her care was not an act. It was a reflection of her character, testament to her empathy and selflessness. He watched as the fiancé attempted to continue the conversation, but the energy had shifted. Her words seemed less important, her gestures less convincing. The contrast between her and the maid could not be ignored. He felt a mixture of clarity and heartbreak. The clarity of seeing the truth about those around him, and the heartbreak of realizing that the person he had intended to marry was not the one he had imagined. In the following days, he reflected on the dynamics in his household. He noticed how easily the maid adapted to his needs without complaint, how naturally she filled the gaps that his feigned disability created, and how her presence brought comfort and stability to his life. He began to understand that true care was not measured by words alone or by grand gestures. It was revealed in the small, consistent acts that demonstrated attention, empathy, and love without expectation. The billionaire found himself increasingly captivated by her presence, her patience, and her genuine humanity. Meanwhile, the fiancé's impatience and discomfort became more pronounced. She seemed burdened by the responsibility of his needs, offering minimal assistance and retreating emotionally when faced with the reality of his dependence. The billionaire realized that her affection was contingent, limited, and ultimately shallow. He felt a growing sense of disappointment, and a quiet disappointment in what he had hoped for, and relief in the clarity that the situation had provided. One day, while the fiancé was visiting, he asked her to help him move across the room. She complied, but her movements were stiff and controlled, her attention elsewhere. She muttered a few polite words of encouragement, but lacked any real warmth. As soon as the task was over, she seemed eager to leave, offering excuses about other commitments. The billionaire observed this with a mix of sadness and understanding, realizing that her presence had always been conditional, limited to convenience rather than genuine care. Later that day, the maid entered the room quietly, noticing his fatigue. Without a word, she guided him gently to a chair, adjusted his cushions, and offered him water. She spoke softly, her tone filled with concern but not pity. "You should rest for a while. Take it slow," she said, her eyes meeting his with quiet empathy. It was a simple act, yet it carried more meaning than any gesture the fiancé had shown. The billionaire felt a profound shift within himself, a recognition that the heart of a person was revealed in these small, unassuming moments, not in appearances or wealth. The contrast between the fiancé and the maid became impossible to ignore. One offered superficial concern, filtered through convenience and expectation. The other offered genuine care, untainted by pretense or self-interest. The billionaire began to reflect on his own values and desires. He realized that he had been searching for love in the wrong places, looking for charm and beauty while overlooking the quiet strength and selfless devotion that truly mattered. The maid had shown him the depth of human kindness, the value of empathy, and the meaning of love without condition. By the end of the week, the billionaire's test had achieved more than he had anticipated. It had revealed the truth about the fiancé's intentions and unexpectedly had illuminated the extraordinary character of the maid. He felt a growing admiration for her, a recognition of her authenticity, and an awareness of the profound difference between those who offered care out of obligation and those who offered it out of genuine compassion. His heart, once guarded and skeptical, began to open to the possibility of a love built on trust, empathy, and selfless care. The experiences of this week left the billionaire with a mixture of emotions: clarity, admiration, disappointment, and hope. The fiancée had revealed her true colors, demonstrating that her affection was conditional and self-interested. The maid, however, had become a source of warmth, stability, and genuine care. He realized that in seeking to test someone else, he had discovered truths about himself, about the kind of love he truly valued, and about the rare, quiet virtues that could touch a heart in ways that wealth and status never could. The stage was set for the next phase of his journey, a deeper exploration of emotions, choices, and the kind of relationships that truly mattered in life. By the fourth week, the billionaire began to notice a profound shift within himself. The act of pretending, which had once been a calculated test, had grown heavy on his heart, not because of the challenge itself, but because of what he was witnessing around him. His fiancée's visits became increasingly revealing of her true nature. She offered care, but it was measured and limited, always with the undercurrent of impatience. Each time he asked for help, he could sense the hesitation in her gestures and the strained politeness in her words. Her charm, which had once captivated him, now seemed fragile and insincere. The billionaire realized that love based on convenience could never sustain a relationship built on trust and genuine connection. In contrast, the maid continued to show unwavering dedication. Her care was not performed for recognition or reward, but stemmed from a natural sense of empathy and responsibility. She observed his moods, anticipated his needs, and adjusted her actions to ensure his comfort. She prepared meals with care, adjusted cushions without prompting, and offered gentle words of encouragement whenever he seemed weary or discouraged. These small, consistent acts of kindness began to leave a mark on his heart, stirring emotions he had not anticipated. Her presence reminded him of the value of selflessness and the beauty of human warmth, qualities that could not be bought or forced. One afternoon, he decided to test both women with a more deliberate challenge. He pretended to be unusually weak, needing significant assistance to move across the room. The fiancée arrived first, her concern polite but fleeting, her movements careful yet reluctant. She helped him stand, but her eyes constantly darted to the clock, and her gestures were mechanical, lacking any sense of genuine connection. She offered a few words of encouragement, but they were superficial, as if spoken from a script rather than the heart. Her actions confirmed what he had begun to suspect. Her affection was conditional, based more on convenience than true care. The maid arrived shortly after, sensing his struggle instantly. She moved with natural ease, steadying him with firm hands and adjusting his posture with precision and concern. Her voice was soft but filled with genuine empathy. "It's okay. Take your time. We'll manage together," she said. Her words were simple, yet they carried a depth of understanding that touched him profoundly. She was not performing a duty. She was showing genuine care for his well-being. In that moment, the billionaire felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. He realized that true kindness was revealed not in words, but in actions, in the quiet, selfless gestures that made a difference without seeking recognition. In the days that followed, the contrast between the fiancé and the maid became impossible to ignore. The fiancé's interactions were increasingly superficial, her concern limited to polite words and minimal effort. She appeared more interested in her own convenience than in genuinely supporting him. The billionaire watched closely, noting every sigh, every glance at the clock, and every sign of frustration hidden behind polite smiles. Her love, he concluded, was conditional and fragile, dependent on ease rather than commitment. The maid, however, continued to act with quiet devotion. She adjusted his chair, prepared meals exactly to his preferences, and offered words of comfort whenever he seemed weary. Her actions were consistent, unprompted, and filled with empathy. The billionaire began to notice the subtle ways she expressed her care, a soft touch when he appeared tired, a reassuring smile when he struggled, and an unwavering patience that never faltered. Each gesture, no matter how small, revealed a depth of character that he had rarely encountered in his life. He realized that her care was not a performance. It was a reflection of her true self. One evening, the billionaire found himself reflecting on his journey so far. He had begun the test to evaluate his fiancée, but the results had led him to unexpected insights about himself and the people around him. He realized that wealth and status could attract attention and admiration, but they could not cultivate genuine care or loyalty. True devotion was rare, and he had found it in the maid, whose actions spoke louder than any words or gestures of wealth could, as he sat quietly in his study. The maid entered with a tray of tea and a light meal. She placed it carefully on the table, her eyes meeting his with a gentle warmth. "You should rest and eat slowly," she said softly. The billionaire felt a profound sense of comfort in her presence. He understood that her care was unconditional, offered without expectation. and filled with a sincerity that he had not found elsewhere. Her actions reminded him that human connection was more valuable than any luxury or status, and that love based on empathy and selflessness was far more enduring than affection based on convenience. Over the next few days, he observed the maid's actions with growing appreciation. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them, adjusted his surroundings for comfort, and offered gentle encouragement when he faced challenges. Each act, no matter how small, revealed a level of thoughtfulness and understanding that the fiancé could not match. He began to see her not just as a helper, but as a person of remarkable character, whose kindness and empathy touched the lives of those around her in ways that went unnoticed by most. The billionaire also began to reflect on his own behavior. He had been cautious, guarded, and skeptical, afraid of being taken advantage of. Yet the maid's consistent care and empathy had begun to break down the walls he had built around his heart. He realized that trust and love were not tests to be passed or calculations to be made. They were experiences to be shared, nurtured, and respected. Her actions had taught him that genuine human connection was built on patience, understanding, and selfless care. One afternoon, as he rested in his study, the fiancée arrived. Her presence marked by politeness, but a noticeable lack of warmth. She inquired about his condition, offering assistance in a formal, measured tone. The billionaire observed her carefully, noting the distance in her expressions and the absence of genuine concern. Her gestures, once appealing, now seemed calculated and superficial. He felt a growing sense of clarity. She was not the person he had hoped she would be. Her love was conditional, fragile, and ultimately self-interested. The maid entered shortly after, noticing the tension in the room. She approached quietly, her eyes filled with understanding and concern. She adjusted his cushions, ensured his comfort, and offered gentle words of reassurance. "Take your time. Don't push yourself," she said softly. The billionaire felt a wave of emotion as he recognized the depth of her care. Unlike the fiancé, the maid's actions were not performed for approval or recognition. They were expressions of genuine empathy and compassion. In that moment, he understood the difference between those who love for convenience and those who love with authenticity. Throughout the week, the billionaire continued to observe both women. The fiancé's behavior confirmed his suspicions, revealing a superficial concern limited to convenience and appearance. The maid's consistent, selfless actions highlighted her extraordinary character and the authenticity of her care. Each observation deepened his understanding of human connection, trust, and love. He realized that wealth could provide comfort and status, but it could not cultivate genuine affection or devotion. True love, he concluded, was found in the quiet. Consistent gestures that revealed empathy, patience, and selflessness. By the end of the 4th week, the billionaire felt a profound change within himself. The test had begun as a way to uncover the fiancé's true nature, but it had evolved into a journey of emotional awakening. He had discovered the limitations of superficial charm and the depth of selfless care. The maid's presence had illuminated the value of empathy, patience, and genuine human connection. He began to understand that love was not a transaction or a performance. It was an experience built on understanding, compassion, trust. The days that followed brought moments of quiet reflection. The billionaire watched the maid's gentle care, her unwavering attention, and her natural empathy. He observed the fiancé's limited concern, her polite gestures, and her conditional affection. The contrast was undeniable, and it filled him with clarity. He recognized that the heart's true measure was revealed in actions, not words or appearances, and that genuine care and love could not be forced or feigned. The maid had touched his heart in ways he had never anticipated, teaching him that the most profound connections are often quiet, unassuming, and rooted in empathy. As the week came to a close, the billionaire felt a growing sense of anticipation and reflection. He understood that the final stage of his journey was approaching, a moment when decisions would need to be made. Truths would be revealed, and hearts would be tested. He had learned the limitations of superficial affection, the power of selfless care, and the profound value of genuine human connection. The lessons of the past month had reshaped his understanding of love, trust, and devotion, and he felt a quiet hope that the next chapter would bring clarity, resolution, and perhaps a deeper, more meaningful bond with the person who had touched his heart so profoundly. The day finally arrived when the billionaire knew he had to reveal the truth. He had completed the weeks-long experiment, observed every detail, and learned more about himself and the people around him than he could have imagined. His fiancée had made her intentions clear through her actions, and the maid had shown unwavering kindness, patience, and selflessness. It was time to face reality and make decisions about the future. He invited both women to the living room. Under the pretense of discussing household matters, the fiancée arrived first, dressed elegantly as always, her smile polite and practiced. She greeted him with a soft voice, expressing concern about his health and offering help with his daily needs. Yet, her gestures were measured and limited, revealing the same conditional affection he had observed for weeks. Her words, though gentle, felt hollow, lacking the warmth and sincerity he had come to value. The maid entered shortly after, her demeanor calm and unassuming. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her eyes attentive and compassionate. She greeted him respectfully, but there was a warmth in her smile that was genuine and unaffected. As she moved to adjust a cushion and ensured his comfort, he felt a profound sense of gratitude and admiration for her presence. She had been consistent, caring, and selfless throughout the entire test, never once asking for recognition or reward. Taking a deep breath, the billionaire began to speak. He explained that he had been pretending to have a disability, that his struggles over the past weeks were not real, and that the purpose of the test had been to observe how each of them would respond. The fiancée's eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. She smiled politely, attempting to maintain composure. But the truth of her intentions had already been revealed through her actions. The billionaire could see the subtle signs of disappointment and frustration in her expression, confirming what he had already known. The maid listened quietly, her face calm and attentive. She did not react with surprise or judgment. Instead, she simply nodded, acknowledging the situation with understanding and compassion. She had cared for him regardless of the circumstances, without expectation or hesitation, and her consistent kindness had left a lasting impression on him. The billionaire realized that she embodied the qualities he valued most: empathy, patience, and selfless care. He turned to the fiancée, his voice measured but firm. "Over the past weeks, I have observed your actions closely. While you have been polite and courteous, your concern has been conditional, limited, and at times hesitant. I need someone who will care without reservation. Someone who shows empathy and support because it comes from the heart, not out of convenience or expectation." The fiancée nodded, her smile fading slightly as she recognized the truth in his words. She attempted to speak, but the billionaire continued, gently but firmly setting the boundaries of what he sought in a partner. He then addressed the maid, his voice softening. "You have shown me what true care and devotion look like. Your actions have been consistent, selfless, and compassionate. You have anticipated my needs, comforted me without expectation, and demonstrated a depth of empathy that I have rarely encountered. Your presence has touched my heart in a way that wealth and status never could." The maid looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of humility and warmth. She had never sought praise, yet in this moment, the billionaire acknowledged the profound impact her kindness had made. The fiancé, realizing that the test had reached its conclusion, left quietly, offering polite farewells, but no indication of genuine regret or understanding. The billionaire watched her go, feeling a mix of relief and clarity. Her true intentions had been revealed. He could finally let go of the doubts and disappointments that had weighed on his heart. The space she left behind was not empty, however, for the maid remained. Her calm presence, a source of comfort and inspiration. In the days that followed, the billionaire began to reflect deeply on the lessons he had learned. The experiment, while initially designed to test someone else, had ultimately become a journey of self-discovery. He had come to understand the difference between superficial concern and genuine care, between conditional affection and selfless devotion. The maid had demonstrated that love and kindness were not measured by words or appearances, but by consistent, thoughtful actions that revealed the heart's true intentions. He began to engage more with the maid, not as an employer, but as someone seeking to understand and appreciate her perspective. They spent time together in conversation, discussing everyday matters, sharing thoughts and reflections, and learning from each other's experiences. The billionaire found himself inspired by her resilience, her humility, and her ability to care deeply without expecting anything in return. Her presence brought a sense of balance and warmth to his life, filling spaces that wealth and luxury had never touched. One afternoon, as they walked through the mansion's garden, the billionaire paused and turned to her. "I have learned so much over the past few weeks," he said softly. "I have seen what true kindness looks like, and I realize that it is rare and precious. Your care has taught me more about love and human connection than anything I have experienced before. I am grateful for your presence and for everything you have done without ever asking for anything in return." The maid looked at him, her eyes reflecting quiet understanding. She had never sought recognition, yet in this moment, her actions were acknowledged with sincerity and appreciation. The billionaire continued, sharing his thoughts about trust, empathy, and the qualities he valued most in human relationships. He spoke of the importance of authenticity, of actions that reflect the heart rather than appearances or convenience. The maid listened attentively, offering gentle insights and reflections of her own. Their conversations were simple, yet profound, revealing the depth of understanding and connection that had grown between them over time. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between them strengthened. The billionaire recognized that the maid's presence had transformed his perspective on life and love. Her selfless care had demonstrated that true devotion and empathy could not be measured by wealth or status, but by consistent, thoughtful actions that touch the heart. He began to understand that the most meaningful relationships are built on trust, respect, and genuine concern for one another's well-being. In quiet moments, he reflected on how different his life could have been if he had overlooked these qualities in others. He realized that the fiancée, despite her charm and elegance, had been unable to provide the genuine care and support he needed. In contrast, the maid, through her unwavering kindness and attention, had revealed the true essence of human connection. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration for her, recognizing that her presence had enriched his life in ways he had never anticipated. One evening, as they shared a simple meal in the mansion's kitchen, the billionaire spoke from the heart. "I have been searching for something meaningful, something real," he said softly. "Over the past weeks, I have discovered that it is not wealth, status, or charm that matters, but the way someone cares, supports, and understands. You have shown me that, and I want to honor and cherish that gift in my life." The maid smiled gently, her eyes reflecting warmth and understanding. She had never sought to change him or influence his decisions, yet her actions had led him to a profound realization about love and human connection. The billionaire knew that the journey ahead would be different from anything he had experienced before. He had come to understand that true love and devotion were not tests to be passed, but experiences to be nurtured and shared. The maid had demonstrated that selfless care, empathy, and patience were the foundations of meaningful relationships, and he was ready to embrace these values in his own life. In the following weeks, their bond grew stronger. The billionaire and the maid spent time together, sharing thoughts, experiences, and quiet moments of companionship. He admired her resilience, her humility, and her unwavering commitment to caring for others. She, in turn, appreciated his sincerity, his willingness to learn, and his growing recognition of the qualities that truly mattered in a human connection. Together, they discovered a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and genuine affection. Through this journey, the billionaire realized that wealth and status, while providing comfort and convenience, could not replace the value of genuine human connection. The fiancé had shown him the limitations of superficial affection, while the maid had revealed the depth of selfless care and empathy. He understood that true love was not about appearances or convenience, but about consistent actions that reflect the heart's true intentions. In the end, the billionaire embraced a new perspective on life and relationships. He recognized that trust, empathy, and selfless care were the true treasures in life, more valuable than any luxury or status. The maid had touched his heart in ways he had never anticipated, teaching him the profound meaning of love, devotion, and genuine human connection. Her presence had transformed his understanding of relationships, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude and hope for the future. As the story of their journey unfolded, the billionaire and the maid continued to build a life together, rooted in trust, empathy, and selfless care. Their bond was strengthened by shared experiences, mutual respect, and a deep understanding of the values that truly mattered. The lessons of the past weeks had reshaped his heart and mind, revealing that genuine love is found not in wealth or status, but in the quiet, consistent acts of kindness and care that touch the heart and transform lives. And in that realization, he found a sense of fulfillment and happiness that he had never known before.